time. Those of you who follow climate change closely, you know this is the time of the year when normally we have the global climate summits. This year for COVID, we can't have the COP, but we are kind of having a virtual COP in this program. For the last few weeks, we have been discussing various facets of COP. We have discussed climate negotiation, we have discussed climate finance, and perhaps we are discussing today topics which is most important. This is the climate coverage. So today I'm feeling the most comfortable because today I am within my friends. I am with the journalist friends of mine who cover climate change regularly internationally and nationally in their respective countries. So let me introduce the panel for you. I have with me Joydeep Gupta, South Asia Director, the Third Pole. Joydeep has been covering climate change and environment. I don't know. He can only say. I don't know how many COPs he have covered. He has a record, I think, on that front. Bishya Mohan, editor, Environment Times of India, a very, very good friend of mine. We have shared rooms in so many COPs, so it's really wonderful to have Bishya with me in this program. I have Dilrukshi Handuneti. She is the Executive Director, Center for Investigation Reporting, Sri Lanka, and she's also been covering environment and climate change, I think, quite some time back. And suddenly found the other day that I have her Yahoo mail, and she said that when you are having my Yahoo mail, it means that we met long time back. So it means that we met long time back. And I have with me Banani Malik, senior reporter, Delhi Observer, Bangladesh. Banani has covered, I think not many COPs, but she has covered one of the most important COPs. That's, I think, the Paris COP, if I'm wrong. And she's also covering the local issues of coastal areas in Bangladesh. Very important. So we'll be knowing from her about the scenario out there. So that's a great panel. And thanks to all of you for kind of making your time. This program is done every Sunday morning in Canada and also simultaneously being streamed in online media rest of the world. Let's start with Joydeep. Joydeep, you have been covering COP for so many years. Now, the coverage of COP, because we are here discussing mainly the South Asian aspects. Do you feel, because you are being kind of consistently you're covering on the South Asian, the Third Pole is basically covering on the South Asian countries. What's your understanding that South Asia, the qualitative and quantitative component of coverage in South Asia is as good as the rest of the, say, from Europe or other countries, or it's not really that?
Quantitatively, no. Quantitatively, coverage of climate summits from media houses in developed countries is higher. There's no doubt about that. And that is, the reason is mostly financial. It is expensive to cover the COP. Quantitatively, if you forget about the developed, it is very, very difficult to differences. Globally, coverage of climate summits has increased massively. I still remember that there was a very huge spurt, a big spurt in coverage of environmental issues when the first Earth Summit took place in Rio in 1992. That was a big spurt because it was a big thing. Then it's sort of went into a situation where only specialist journalists and agencies were covering it. And there were some climate summits which were seen to be more important than others, and more people were covering it. Kyoto in 1997 is the best example of that. That was also covered by many more because the climate summit takes place every year. After 1997, I think the coverage again started to die down. The 2002 climate summit was held in Delhi, and hardly any Delhi reporter is aware of this. Any Delhi-based reporter who covers climate even knows that Delhi has hosted a COP. So this situation continued till 2006. Then in 2007 came the fourth report of the IPCC. And that was something that really shook up people, because it quite apart from that one error with the glaciers, apart from that, it was quite a seminal report in many ways, because it proved the case for human-induced climate change. It proved scientifically the case for the kind of damage that's going on. And it made a strong case for adaptation as well. And that is why we suddenly saw a spurt in the next coverage of the COP in 2007 in Bali. The Bali COP actually was covered quite extensively compared to the earlier COPs.
Okay.
Since then, it's gone up, up and up. Yes, of course, there are years which are more important. 2009 Copenhagen was extremely important. Even the failure taught the world a lesson, and it was covered extensively. Then 2015 Paris. And what this year would have been another of those, because this is the year that enhanced ambitions on the Paris commitments are expected. So maybe we shall see extra coverage in 2021.
Okay, so you feel that since Bali, there's always been a kind of a surge of coverage. Now, I have a few things to know from you from that point, but let's come to Vishwa on that. Vishwa, you are from the mainstream media. Joydeep's way of looking at climate change issues and Third Pole way of looking at climate change issues is different from the mainstream media. I am from mainstream media as well. I have started covering COP from 2009, as Joydeep pointed out. That's a year when everything went notch ahead above. I think you have also started from 2009, Vishwa?
No. I started from 2013, from Warsaw.
2013.
Yeah.
So now my point is that since 2009 to say last COP, it often comes to a pass when you basically end up kind of a similar kind of conclusion with a highly, I would say, compromised. And my editor says me, what's the point in going to COP? You are basically reporting the same thing year after year. So do you think that mainstream media in India, what's your experience? Mainstream media, how seriously they look at this COP and kind of COP reporting?
I think obviously when we were supposed to cover the Paris climate change conference, that was the most important in terms of, if you look at from the mainstream media point of view, that was the one when the entire mainstream media was really looking for the coverage of COP. But before Paris and even after Paris, it was the enthusiasm was not much. And even even Joydeep even from the mainstream media point of view, I believe unless and until there is no like fellowship kind of thing or that kind of support, it's very difficult for the journalists to go out and cover COP. Unfortunately, this is very unfortunate, though mainstream media in India spent a lot on local issues. They send reporters all across the country to cover disaster, election, or so many things.
But not on COP.
But not COP. And I strongly believe that had it not been the fellowship kind of arrangement, it would have been very difficult from the mainstream media to cover the COP directly from the venue. And as you said, after covering COP for so many years, as you also experienced, like whatever happening there, it can be covered from here as well. And even the editors in the newsroom know that our journalists covering climate change and environment can give us the copy from here. And now, now in this age when even you have been in touch with the negotiators on WhatsApp, you can get all the details, even sitting in Delhi or Kolkata or Dhaka. But as a journalist, I think it's better to go there and cover.
The feel of it.
Yeah, feel of it. And also there are so many things which you can gather from there, because it's not only the country perspective, but it's the global perspective, and you need to interact with people from different country. You also get a chance to talk to negotiators from different countries. And also you have, in fact, get an opportunity to interact with reporters of other countries, because journalists, their country's perspective is entirely different.
That's what Jaideep said. That.
Yeah, you, Jaideep, all must have experienced that during the Paris COP. The way we were looking at the things was entirely different from the way Americans were looking at the things. In fact, you remember when John Kerry came and gave a speech, the way American media were so euphoric about this. Indian media, in fact, very puzzled that in that sense, because Indian media has their own priority in that sense, because India believes that from the national point of view.
I'll be coming to that. Just a quick supplementary question, and then I'll come back to that point you were making.
Yeah.
Do you feel that it's a failure of the mainstream journalists like us that we really could not communicate what it's all about? It's too tangential for our editors to understand that what's happening in COP. So they are only interested about perhaps an interview of Indian minister or likewise. So go deeper, dive deeper into that issues, and those are relevant issues are not really being. So do you consider it's also a failure of the journalists that we really could not communicate or are not able to communicate what we are supposed to?
If we try to convince the editors about the importance of it, you have to tell them very clearly why it is important. And in fact, even if they understand its importance, the kind of space they give to the climate change coverage is not enough. If you are supposed to write your copy in 300, 400 words, and so it's what you can do. And the secondly, when you have to write in the copy that if you have to explain 2 degrees
every day looking for work,
target thing, or 1.5 degrees Celsius, then you have to explain it to readers.
Exactly. You need a paragraph too.
Yes. So even to explain 1.5 degree target or 2.5 degree target, you have to explain in one paragraph. So in 300, 400 words, you won't be able to explain.
So basically what you were saying, that the structure of our media structure, the way we do the coverage, say, for example, if you look at a US media or UK media, Jaideep can tell us better, their stories, I have seen the long stories. So they big stories, so they can explain a lot of things out there, but we have really that 400, 450, 500 at most. Words, so that may not be good enough. So that's a great point. I'll come to that. But let me go to Dilrukshi. Dilrukshi, from you are covering environment and climate change in Sri Lanka for quite some time. So sitting in Sri Lanka when this COP happened, what are the kind of vibes you get? I'm sure that few journalists from Sri Lanka go there, perhaps part of fellowship at Bishop Point. Out or otherwise, but what's the vibes you get? Are they important to the local media, the editors, and like that?
Thank you for the question. I think Jaideep and Vishwa together answered that question quite well for me as well.
What's the Sri Lankan position?
Yes, in Sri Lanka we have, I would say, less sensitivity and less sensibility towards this issue. It's also partly, I feel, is because extreme weather impacts were not necessarily felt or never understood in a particular context. We would say, oh yes, there's floods taking place in Bangladesh or something happening in India, parts of India. So we would look at, I mean, I remember this as a young reporter, that we were looking at other countries in the region and wondering, oh, all these disasters are taking place in the region. But it hasn't really hit home. And I think the tsunami was a decisive thing, though it had done, you can't call it an extreme climate event, but that really jolted us. That taught us a few things about our own vulnerability and the fact that we are not ready. I think the preparedness at least slowly, started seeping in afterwards. And I talk about here, I refer to the government as well as how the media would look at these issues. Earlier, we were considered, highly, romantic, people who have taken on this very romantic beat. Nobody wanted to do anything about it. But of course, I was fortunate because I was a political reporter doing climate and environment coverage. And I used it to the maximum because I could actually prioritize my story over many others only because I look for the politics in it. And I think generally in South Asia, this business of politics is such an important thing. And we followed the Indian coverage very closely. To be very honest, while we have 2 Indian journalists who are saying that it's difficult, it's not been so great, but let me tell you, we are kind of dismally failed to create the kind of awareness and have the kind of reportage that is critical and looking at issues. Also, where we were going to be, what is Sri Lanka's position? At least we understood, at least I understood what India's position was to an extent. So I could at least understand and write about why they were taking certain positions, like polluter pays, something like that, right? But there was no such thing, no such sensitivity attached to it. I also think it's not, yes, it's because of the fellowships that people get the opportunity to cover. But I also think but would we do the same thing about the World Economic Forum? No, the editors are interested. So where is our, it raises the question what our editorial priorities are. We would look at the, rupees, dollars, whatever, but we would not necessarily value the environment we live in and to want to understand what it means to each of us in our places.
Okay, that's another side of the story, and in fact, I'll come back to you to know about this, how the editorial or editors treat the local story, because I'm asking this, or I'll be asking this simply because Sri Lanka is one of the most vulnerable country to climate change. So that needs to be reflected somewhere in the reportage. So I'll be coming to that. But let me go to Bonani. Bonani, you have been covering environment for quite some time. You were also in Paris, I can remember. In Bangladesh, when the COP happens, for example, when you covered COP, how much importance you got in your paper on COP reporting? Just let us know very simply, what's your importance or your stories, how it was kind of carried during the COP?
Thank you very much for asking the question. Actually, all of my seniors fellows, they have clearly mentioned their experience and it resembles like my experience. They say actually what exactly I'm facing. Our senior reporters and editorial team, they actually don't evaluate environment issue as important. So when I express my interest to join the COP, then they say, no, it's not important, and we're not able to give you money and all. Then I became so disappointed. I started searching other sources of getting fund and all.
Sure.
And in this way, I actually got some funds and I was able to go there. Yeah, so that's the reality. Actually,
so
our editors are
not much importance is given. Okay, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. I'll come back to you for the local experience you have later. But Jaideep, you have heard the mainstream media, how they kind of treat, and you all know that you know much better than all of us. What's your position? The question I have asked, Vishu, I come back to you on the same question first, that are we not positioning the stories properly? Is it the failure of the journalists to position the story? That's why the mainstream media and the editors are not picking it up. Or it's a general averseness to the environmental or climate issues. They feel it's too distant, too kind of distant from us to be considered. What's your take on that?
Look, if you are not going to do climate stories through the year, if you're not going to do stories sitting wherever you are, in your base city or in your own country, in that case, do not expect the editors to suddenly be very enthused. because a big meeting is taking place somewhere.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Now, I know Vishwa covers climate issues regularly. And whatever space he gets in the print edition, he gets almost, I think, the entire story in the net edition, which is more or less the same thing as what
Same
you
for
just
us.
And what you just told me about newspapers in UK or US, actually exactly the same thing operates there.
Okay.
When you say that, oh, they're giving a lot of space, you are looking at only at their net edition.
Yes,
they're
yes,
doing
absolutely. Yes.
They are doing exactly the same.
We are looking at the online stories actually.
Yes, and they're doing exactly the same. So don't let that bother you, because increasingly it's the net editions that are more important. The net editions that are being seen, that are being archived, that are being used, that are being referred to by academics, because that's what's available over a long period of time. We have moved away from the time when we all used to keep newspaper clippings, so we all keep our net clippings now in a separate thing.
Much easier.
Yeah. So the thing is, it is whichever media outlet you are in, big, small, specialized, non-specialized, if you are interested, the stories are there. The stories are there right through the year. And if you are interested enough, and if you're doing those stories right through the year, stories on climate impacts, on climate science, on adaptation, on renewable energy mitigation, if you're doing on policy making, if you're doing that, then your editor actually has a far weaker case to say, hey, why you off to? Because you are built your case right through the year.
Absolutely.
I mean, I know this, that in Vishwa's case, for example, I don't think he's told like, oh, this is not worth doing. What he probably is told is that it's clashing with 20 other things that you were supposed to do. So that is a problem we all face.
Yes. No, but absolutely. I think I take your point that you have to really develop the case throughout the year. I think same for me, as because we're writing throughout the year in Telegram, so my editor never asked me, why are you going? He may not be giving the money, but he never asked me that why you were going. But the point is, Jaideep, that these areas, the Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, India, South Asia is one of the most vulnerable areas to climate change. So it's not really, or do you think it's reflected adequately in the overall editorial policy? I'm not only talking about COP, overall editorial policy. And the point you raised, a very interesting point. It's a position that we don't have enough expert people on the beat, so less people on the beat who do environmental climate coverage throughout the year. Is that the reason that we are having less coverage?
It's very uneven. It's extremely uneven. And it's this unevenness goes throughout South Asia.
Okay.
In all our countries, you'll find the big media houses will almost always have at least one, in some cases more than one, both interested and knowledgeable reporters who are doing this and who are doing a good job of it. So they're fine. That's the problem. Isn't there? The problem is in the smaller media outlets.
Okay.
In the smaller media outlets who usually don't have interested. You don't have to be knowledgeable. The stories are out there for anybody to do.
Exactly.
You just have to be interested. So if you are interested, then you can do those stories. And that is what they lack. What we find now, we have our website publishes on a Creative Commons license. So anybody can republish, right?
Sure.
So what is our republication rate and where? We find our republication rate in other local South Asian languages is 6 times our republication rate in English. So the editors know about this, they want the story, they are not getting the story.
Oh, so they are not getting the story.
They are not getting the story. Because they don't have their own staffers who are interested
and
enough
resources to
do
develop
the
those stories.
Yeah, who are not getting the stories.
Okay. I think that's another very interesting point. Bishnu, I come to you with this Jaideep's point that the editors are not getting the stories. At the same time, said let's take air pollution. Air pollution, not only in Delhi, in Kolkata or throughout the country, is such a well-read subject. I'm not talking about the quality. There are issues about the quality, but a lot of people are writing about air pollution. But when you go to the climate change, as Jaideep was talking, that not only the COP, I think throughout the year, I think if I'm wrong, Jaideep can correct me, the rate of coverage on climate is less than the issues like air pollution. Why you think that kind of disparity is there? Are we not my question specifically is, are we not mainstreaming climate change in the environment coverage? Are we keeping it standalone? Is that the problem?
No, that's not the issue. It's very natural that if something is happening now, something is hitting you now, it gets precedence over other issues. Because the climate change is, when you talk about the climate change, it talks about what will happen to the world, what will happen to your country by the end of the 21st century or by 2050.
Too distant.
Too distant. So that's the reason. And if you look at the air pollution issue, air pollution is the current problem. It's hitting you right there, right now. So obviously, the focus is more towards covering air pollution. But you have to tell the people, you have to explain the readers how your current practices, your current emitting practices will lead you to a disastrous consequences. As Jaideep said, actually we are not telling the story in a right way so that it doesn't get space. For example, you have to tell your reader how certain decisions taken at the global forum will affect your country, will affect your future, and then obviously it will get space. You might have noticed that recently, just before the G20 meeting, there was a report on how the countries fare on the G20 on their climate mitigation and adaptation front. And when you write this story, we have to tell the readers that where your country stands as far as actions is concerned. So you have to pitch the story in a way that it can get a space. So we can't compare it with the air pollution because this is something which hits
too urgent and
that's too distant. So you have to treat it in a different way, and so that people can connect themselves with it.
Okay, so I'll come back to you and Jaideep with a question that I'm throwing the question before we'll take the response later. That is climate change is less political in our part of the world when it comes to coverage, say in contrast to say air pollution or likewise. I'll come to that later. But Dilrukshi, let's come back to you and let's know that forget about COP. Jaideep made a point that you need to build up the case throughout the year. You have to report throughout the year. So what are the issues in Sri Lanka, in general mainstream media? How you cover climate change and environment in general? What's the kind of level of coverage according to your understanding?
Jayanta, what I shared with you earlier has changed so much. When we were reporters, it was difficult to convince the editors and difficult to say that it's an important story, even when you're on the case, right? But by the time we migrated to those positions and came to manage desks, and we have grown with this discussion. We have also seen how other countries participate, and also the political positioning, as well as how editorial perceptions and approaches have also changed along the way. So in a way, we are actually lucky now that this has become a mainstay and people do cover. And I think Jaideep said it right. The local languages at the local community level, the smaller media houses, about investing in journalists and the kind of journalism you're talking about is a tough one. but the mainstream media houses, they understand this story is now about survival. It's about life and death. And it's about many issues, from air pollution to sea level rise to, it's really visiting you. And now the urgency is about understanding the story. I want to just share something with you. This relates to the pandemic. Yeah.
Okay.
When we went into a lockdown situation in March and April, suddenly all the defense correspondents, all the other types of correspondents who used to think these are the biggest beats under the sun, we would have these little discussions on Zoom, and they would say, how do I cover the health story? Why you never really prioritize the importance of understanding that this is such a life and death thing. It's one of the most important beats to be covering. And at least you have to have a smattering of understanding, because the pandemic forced all of us to become health reporters and environment reporters and to try and understand that. Right now, I think one of the biggest learnings that we have in newsrooms is that people they want to be developing their skills and want to be sensible about it. And I do think we have the COVID-19 pandemic to thank for,
Okay.
Yeah.
So you mean to say that pandemic has kind of infused that understanding the importance of the environment coverage as a whole. So it's something dawned on in the newsroom that we need to cover these issues much more. They are much more important and kind of closer to your existence. That's what you're saying.
It was happening for a while, and sensibility was growing. And as I said, in the past 10 years, the climate
COVID has done the trigger.
Environment stories have been very important. But COVID has, if you can't cover the pandemic, then what kind of reporter are you? So it has actually challenged reporters to try and build the skill set that we consider as normal.
Okay. That's very interesting. Bonani, you are covering environment, you are covering climate change. Let us know, say in Bangladesh. Bangladesh is one country where there's a huge impact of climate change. There are disasters. You can see you are affected by those disasters. So, say as a journalist, as an environment journalist, what kind of stories you do? Local stories. Are there enough climate-related local stories, climate impact stories? What exactly you do there?
Well, actually, I am from the southwestern part of Bangladesh. I'm from the coastal area. So from my childhood, I have witnessed the cruel realities. What local people they're suffering. So yes, I have my keen interest to work, focusing on these sufferings, their ordeals. But sometimes, maybe when I shared with my editor, but our senior reporters, they are telling that we must, the way we have to present or the way we have to talk with the editors, we must convince our editor, we must say that this is the important issue. So if we are able to express it properly, then they will give the approval to cover the issue.
Sure.
Now let me share you the issues, which is right now I am covering.
Okay.
Right now, actually, the most important issue is migration. Migration. Women, children, they are migrating to the big cities from the rural level. And they are taking shelter in the slums. And they are really facing lots of sufferings. Like, I know few stories, small children, how he becomes drug peddler, and lots of sexual harassment and other systems there. So what I'm doing, I am trying to link with the sufferings these people, these climate refugees are facing, and when they are migrating.
So you say that they are becoming lifestyle stories.
Yeah.
They're becoming kind of lifestyle stories.
Yeah.
That individuals, and it's about human beings, it's a human story.
That
how people are migrating from one place, being affected by climate change, ending up in the slums, in the urban areas. So it's basically a human story. That's what you're saying. So what's your editor response on that? They would like to take the story, and would like to kind of publish it. What's the?
He wants to cover on the issues.
Okay, great. I'll come to you later, but then Joydeep, that's very interesting to hear from Bonani that this importance of turning the stories into human stories, lifestyle stories. Absolutely.
That's
so
true.
I'm harping this on and on and on because it's a question I keep on asking that, see, are we, you pointed out, are we packaging the stories adequately? Are we packaging it kind of unidimensionally, or we are linking horizontal kind of social linkages? It turns into a crime story, it turns into a human story. So you feel that it's packaging. And also another point, I would like to audiovisual media. I think we have been talking about the print media so far. All of us, I think, from the print media. In audiovisual media, normally, if you don't send a journalist, you can always give those feeds. The feeds are always there. But still, I can still remember in the COPs, apart from, I think, the last day of Paris, none of the major media houses, I'm not talking about the kind of English speaking Delhi-based media houses, they might have covered, but in the local medias, they hardly have covered something in the Paris even, though it has a lot of implication with the daily life of the people in West Bengal. Sundarban is there, you know, better. So why even though you're not picking up the things from the say whatever way?
But that's our failure. It's our failure to relate what's happening to what's happening to our audiences. That is entirely. See, climate impacts. Why do you think Bangladesh gives it a lot more coverage? Because they have the impacts.
Exactly.
They have the impacts right there. They have a very significant percentage of their population already impacted, and that is why they can see it, and that is why they're looking at it. I am completely against this business of, you know, calling something environment journalism, calling something else political.
Exactly.
This silo style is what kills everything.
Exactly.
Because
exactly.
all these issues are issues that affect our audiences. Let me explain what I'm saying with an example. We recently have been doing a number of media workshops along the coastal Bay of Bengal coast in both Bangladesh and India. And one thing we have been finding is that right through, especially Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, and Bangladesh, these three places, plus the Sundarbans part of West Bengal, people are already suffering heightened blood pressure. And why heightened blood pressure? Because the water that they drink has become saltier. The water that they get from their tubewells has become saltier due to sea level ingress. When we put the experts and the journalists together to discuss this, we found Dinamani, Dinamalar, Andhra Prabha, Odisha Times, all 3 or 4 newspapers in West Bengal, including papers I don't think who have ever covered environment before, like Ganashakti. They all did whole series of stories on this. They all did a whole series of stories on this. That is the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is that if you try to cover a COP in a vacuum, it's not going to work. It's not going to work for your audiences, and therefore it's not going to work for your editors. So it's only when your audience and your editor knows that climate change is a big story. If the editor knows that climate change is a big story, then climate negotiations automatically become a part
of it. Come into that. Yeah. So this whole issue of kind of picking up the COPs and then go silent for the rest of the year doesn't.
That is what happens. In effect, that is what happens. That many papers do just that. But it's not enough to say that they're covering the COP. You have to see what are the stories they're doing. Those papers which are covering the issue only during the COP, you'll find, are almost always simply reproducing what the Indian government delegation is saying, or the Pakistani government delegation is saying,
or
the Nepali or the Sri Lankan government delegation is saying, because they're not interested. They're doing it because suddenly, for 2 weeks every year, they suddenly start getting some press releases from the ministries. So they just use the press releases. So that is not climate coverage, nor is that COP coverage.
Exactly. And it's going expected that it will end up like this if we just take a standalone position on the COPs and do nothing rest of the year. So it has to be affected. Bishop, Jaideep has also flagged on that the official version. We all hear the official versions when we go to COP and cover. We definitely go to the Indian kind of room and hear what the Indian politicians or ministers or the secretaries are talking about. But we also try to understand that the various angles and try to have a kind of a comprehensive story. Now, that's definitely we all do, and we all agree to do that. But it brings another point that this year we are not having the COP. Very beginning, I think you and Jaideep both said that this year in 2020 was supposed to be a very, very important COP, but we couldn't have it for COVID. So it goes down to 2021 Glasgow. So from Indian, I'll come to Jaideep also on that. What's the Indian government current position on climate change? And what do you feel that, you were there in the last Madrid, and from taking on from Madrid and now here in Glasgow, 2 years in between, what do you feel that what the Indian position will be? You cover environment sitting in Delhi. You were the person to know about it. What's the Indian government position, and how you feel will roll out the Indian government position in Glasgow?
Look, one thing is given: India is not going to raise its ambition before 2020.
Not raise the ambition. Yes,
that's the point. Which every official you speak to ministers, all say, no, we are not going to raise our ambition, because their point is, it can be contested severely, but their point is, we are ambitious enough and we are on the track to meet our Paris commitment. So we are not going to raise our commitment, raise our ambition, no matter what China is doing, no matter what EU is doing. India is not going to raise its ambition. What India will do, India is taking it in a different way, because when you talk about the international conference and talk about climate change, it's not only climate change and environment, it's a politics, it's a business, it's a diplomacy.
Absolutely.
And now the business part is linked to it big time. India and France together launched that International Solar Alliance. Now International Solar Alliance is gradually become bigger and bigger. So many companies have started joining the International Solar Alliances. Similarly, India has in fact pitched for the Coalition for Disaster Resilience Infrastructure. So it's all now business aspects are linked to it. And therefore the country have started taking interest in it in a different way. Like if you go for that mitigation action, how it will affect your business, and in other way, how you'll go for adaptation and mitigation so that it will make a good business sense. You might have noticed that recently Indian government has brought number of big industrial house on table and tell them, look, you have to take your call how to reduce your carbon footprints. And once the big business house come together and say, we are going to cut our carbon footprints this way, then obviously it will add up to the India's overall mitigation target. Indian point is, when we are talking about in terms of finance, when you are talking about the private finance, look, in terms of mitigation and adaptation action also, you look at what our private sectors are doing.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Instead of India's raising its own ambition, India is mobilizing its private sectors to involve in good practices so that we'll move on the mitigation path.
That's in a way a bit of a global policy as well. We are even global context. If you look at the negotiation, they are trying to bring more private players into the picture and get the funding from that. But Bishop, don't you think that it can be a double-edged weapon? In one side, definitely it adds to your value, it adds to your kind of emission cart, whatever you're doing. But industries will only invest where they are going to get return. And there are issues like, say, loss and damage. there are issues like damages or adaptation where industries may not get anything. So if the whole onus goes on the industries to work on climate change, might be those sectors will be left out where there will be little takers. So might be the kind of area like Sundarban may be lost in the bargain. So don't you think this can be a double-edged weapon? Maybe the solar can flourish, but others can be pushed back.
No, here the government has to play a role.
Yes.
For example, government has to link certain things. For example, if you give an example of Sundarban, in fact, government will have to link the responsibility to save Sundarban with so many like practices which the business houses are doing. For example, giving incentives to business houses only when they invest in certain adaptation action or mitigation actions. So government will have to play a role where they will have to incentivize business in a different way.
Exactly.
So that the business houses can in different way. Like, for example,
not really the business as usual business.
No, not as usual business, because you have to incentivize, because they are there to do business. So you have to incentivize them. So, and for this, maybe the government will have to tell the business houses that,
so
look,
government will have to do that, but is government doing it or not? That's a different question. Is government doing it?
That's a different question. That's a different question. And during this pandemic phase, everything has gone
goes
back.
topsy-turvy.
A lot of things, even the conditions for environmental clearances or the period for environmental clearances which you have given, now it all extended. So in fact, the COVID situation is the last 7-8 months, we went back on
and who knows the long-term impact of that on environment. Yes, I think that's pretty interesting. Let kind of Dilrukshi, Sri Lankan position. Vishwa talking about in Indian perspective that Indian government is trying to infuse the kind of a private independence into the business of climate reduction and business, almost, if I may put it bluntly, market taking over climate change climate change impact reduction. So what's the position in Sri Lanka? Is it the same kind of thinking in Sri Lanka, or it's different?
Sri Lanka has not necessarily looked at mitigation, but has always prioritized adaptation as its approach. I mean, this has been in terms of policy commitment. So everything stems from their agenda. And then, of course, there are private sector engagement, which is increasing. But if you actually look at what Sri Lanka has played, I mean, what has Sri Lanka's role been in the past in the climate negotiations? You wouldn't be able to tell me what it was. And for a reason. Even Maldives has had a better, bigger, more impactful voice. And this, I think Sri Lanka has to understand that while we have been really working hard, using our national climate change adaptation policy and looking at key drivers and looking at key sectors that are going to get affected. So they have been doing a lot of work at the ground level. But when you take political positions, Sri Lanka's position is not known to many, and I wouldn't say that I know it either. And I'm more familiar with the Indian position and the Maldivian position because it's been vocally expressed, and whether we like it or not, it's out there for people to understand. But I'm just hoping, and I'm also trying to understand what the thinking is like right now. But I think they're going to look at more climate finance and then how to draw more investments and also to do some sensible climate smart investment, particularly in the infrastructure, because Sri Lanka is really one of the countries that are, really impacted by running high climate risks. And this has been restated, which was never known before. Now people understand this is happening. And this also makes government respond with more urgency, with a sense of urgency, and people to respond better, because you have to mobilize resources to ensure our infrastructure is secure. We are a small island nation, and we really have 1/3 of our population living in coastal regions. So our priorities are going to be different. And we really need to look at climate financing in a more practical, sensible way that helps people. And I hope when COP happens next year, we will have better positions to take.
Okay. Jaideep, let me hear, because this is a very important and very interesting issue, and I think your view is very important, is that how you see the position of various South Asian countries vis-a-vis leading to Glasgow. will the position be consistent to what they have before, or you are seeing any changes? What's your point?
I don't see any changes. I don't see any changes in the run-up to Glasgow, because as Vishwa pointed out quite correctly, the Indian government is not planning any changes in its position in terms of ambition. And as far as South Asia is concerned, when it comes to mitigation, you will have to basically talk of India, because others are not polluting. The other countries are not doing anything near the same level of pollution. So
we are elephant in the room.
Yeah,
we are elephant in the room.
The Indians are the ones who are doing all the polluting. We
are all accepting it. We are all accepting it.
So therefore, given the when it comes to mitigation, it becomes an Indian responsibility as far as South Asia is concerned. And given that, given how much are the GHG emissions of Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bangladesh, Bhutan, even Pakistan, it is more than the others, but even Pakistan, if you look at their GHG emissions, it's not going to make a significant difference what they do. What India does will make a significant difference, yes.
And India is not going to increase the ambition. That we all know, and we have also said that. But Vishwa was also talking about the involvement of private sectors in funding. And the question that I asked Vishwa, I come with the same question to you. Don't you think it's too much kind of dependence on the private sector? And don't forget that we are the country or the group of countries, when we are going to COP, we are contesting the global position of the, say, annexed countries of private funding. We want public funding out there. We want public funding in COPs, but back home when we are getting down from the flight, we are talking about private funding. So this contradiction is there. So what do you feel about it?
No. Hang on. What Vishwa said was not so much private funding. What Vishwa said was private reduction of GHG emissions by the private sector, control of GHG emissions by the private sector. And at the end of the day, please understand that it's the private sector that has to control its GHG emissions. They're responsible for well over half the emissions. Even if and the public sector put together will make about half the emissions, and the private sector the other half. So you cannot ignore the GHG emissions of the public sector. So what Vishwa was talking about is that the government is telling the private sector to control its emissions, and they're perfectly correct to do so. And they should have been saying this earlier. And I'm glad they're saying this now. And the other part that you were talking about funding by private sector, well, given the pandemic situation, I don't see that happening in the foreseeable future. Because it is true that private sector funding through corporate social responsibility was what over the last 6 years has funded millions of toilets in our country. And that has worked very well. It has worked very well in Bangladesh. They got a lot of CSR money into building toilets. So that is entirely possible. But I suspect that given the pandemic situation, the government will now incentivize CSR money into health centers, health and wellness centers, vaccinations.
So it kind of
so it will have to move in that direction, I think.
So not a good news actually.
It has to be done.
It has to be done. It's a priority as of now.
Yeah.
Now we have almost come to the end of the program. I asked the same question to all of you. Maybe I start with Dilrukshi and then I'll come to Joydeep to conclude that South Asian countries are one group of countries which hardly talk in singular voice in the COPs. If you look at Africa, they are fighting. 15 countries are fighting among themselves, but they when go to the COP, they talk about the common issues together. But we hardly see that. We are allowing our geopolitics to influence everything on the ground. So what do you take, Dilrukshi, that don't, even under the government level, at other levels, don't you think that there should be a coherent voices about the common issues of South Asia? Because we are highly impacted by climate change?
Thank you, Jayanta, for that question, because I really wanted to raise this issue that we have never had a South Asian position, so to speak. And achieving that might be actually problematic because we also have two big countries in the region. And much like the SAARC, the same issues will play out. And also India's considerable requirements and its position taking may, of course, it is very, it's based on your national priorities and what you experience as a country to be understood. But in that, perhaps I think I do see a role for India to play. Honestly, I do. Mm-hmm. And I also think, how do you accommodate the smaller countries with very different requirements and similar but different? We have similar requirements. We also have very different requirements.
Scale is different.
The Himalayan the Himalayan mountains to the coastal plains here and elsewhere, and to the little island nation of Maldives. How can we adapt a common position? And I think, honestly, that onus really lies on India because it can, this is not to say that they haven't. At least journalists have tried to come up with the South Asian position, cover the stories of the region, because that's very important. Just as much as the politicians are supposed to be talking to each other, journalists are also supposed to be talking to each other and prioritize the concerns that we have. Without waiting for politicians, I think this whole agenda setting, if we were to talk about agenda setting, it can actually start, and it does happen in so many ways, that the region's journalists could be actually showing what's important to us as a region. It's important to us as individual countries, but several things are also very important to all of us as a region as a whole.
Okay. So very well taken. Bonani, very quickly, you cover gender issues. Don't you think that the women affected by climate change, Jaydeep was talking about it. I personally have seen in Indian Sundarban and Bangladesh Sundarban how the women are affected by salinity. In fact, I and Jaydeep actually went to that particular house, Jaydeep, you can remember, and that they couldn't even bath for days, months because of the salinity and the kind of skin problem they have, other kind of issues. So very quickly, 30 seconds. So you feel that the gender issues need to be talked together?
Yeah. Actually, many times we talk gender issues, giving a special emphasis on women. They are taking a lot of burdens and all, and especially the time of climate change and all. But there is a silent disaster that we don't notice sometimes. For example, river erosion. What happens when women, they face river erosion, they are supposed to shift their places.
I admit that. So you feel that the different countries need to talk on these common issues together?
Of course. Right now, we need a platform like SAARC or South Asia, where we can get our common value, common ideas.
So we need to talk together.
Talk together, of course.
Great.
And
sure.
I want to say that you didn't ask, but I am interested to share my government's position in regards of combating climate change and all. Our government, they are locally taking lots of measures, and at the same time, they're also receiving lots of funds from UNDP, World Bank and all. But at the same time, our government, what they are doing is controversial. You know that Rafale power.
That's for a different day. And I know once you open that box cannot be stopped.
Exactly.
Cannot be put back. The lead cannot be put back. I know what you are driving at, but not today because we have 1 minute, 1.5 minutes. Bishop, Dilrukshu said that India has to take onus for this collective voice in the region. Very clear. Jaydeep also said that onus is also on India because India is the biggest polluter in the region in a way. So you see that the geopolitics that we are going through and also the pandemic and everything happening around us in this kind of a coherent voices from South Asia in Glasgow or somewhere down the line.
Yeah,
you see that happen actually?
It's not happening, but India will have to do it, and other big countries will also have to do it because climate change doesn't have boundaries.
Absolutely.
Because the climate change is the borderless issue, and obviously the multilateral forums are playing its role. At regional forum, India is a big country, geographic wise and demographically. India will have to take the lead and take everyone along.
And over the past year, we have
business and politics can be within the border, but handling climate change can't be within the border. We'll have to take call and take everyone together.
And if not government goes forward, you feel the kind of tier 2, tier 3, the bureaucrats, the academicians, the media, kind of groups like that need to put pressure on the governments to work on that line so that they kind of talk in the same language. Yes, I think we have that experience of Sundarbans where we do that. So, Jaideep, the same question, just as before that, I just kind of share a 15-second story. I interviewed the Pakistan Environment Minister during the last COP. I wrote about it as well. And he said that already discussions was on between India and Pakistan to talk about climate change together. That was at the height of when the border issues are happening in a way. We should talking about the borderless, but there are border issues which affect the borderless issues. That's the problem in our geopolitics. So, but when I take back that input to an Indian bureaucrat and talk about it, I said, how would you know that? I said, it's only told by the Pakistan minister. He said, it's right, but don't write about it. And even if you write, don't take my name. It's a fact, but I don't see that happening. So that's the kind of, so both Pakistan side and India side, they understand the importance of talking together, but geopolitics gets better of that. What's your position?
It's not geopolitics that's getting the better of that. It's their domestic political compulsions that's getting the better of that.
Geo means countries themselves.
So yes, and unless somebody shows some guts, things are not going to change, and things absolutely and totally need to change. I mean, right now, with the Indian and Chinese troops looking at each other across the border in eastern Ladakh, right there, the glaciers are not forming this winter at the same speed as last winter. And they are right now, both armies are trying to figure out where they're going to pitch their tents because the glaciers are not forming at the same speed. So this is not something that is different between countries. This is common.
I think that's a great point that Jaideep made. And in fact, I remember some time back, there's a film, I forgot the name of the Hindi film, our famous artist Saif Ali Khan was there. And that film was shot in Lake Market area, in South Calcutta area. And I was told that 3 months before the film or 6 months before the film, they took help of the private people who do the meteorological thing to know whether there will be raining on that day or not. So the climate change and issues that have come to that pass that you have to plan, you have to integrate that in your planning. So it's no wonder that Chinese and Indian soldiers need to figure out where to put the train, considering the glacial issues. So that's a great discussion. I think we keep on going and going, but I think we have to stop here. We have completed our time. But I end with this note that we all understand COVID has played its role and is going to play its role in the future negotiation, financially and otherwise. But I think the media, the coverage of climate, not only in COP, Jaideep pointed out, it has to be throughout the year. I think if that can be pushed, then that can be a good I think, onus in making people understand, the editors understand the importance of issue. Because end of the day, when Amphan hits Sundarban or Kolkata, it's my window shattering. So people have to understand the importance of climate change, what's happening in COP down there in their own window, own house. Then only I think even the editors will acknowledge it. And we have done that in human stories, not necessarily a standalone climate stories. That has to go. Thank you. Thank you everybody for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Another day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam.